Hi everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today we're going to be talking about the lead masks case of 1966, as well as the case of the toxic lady. 3 deaths, still a mystery to us, detectives and investigators. And so we begin. The lead masks case, 1966 in Brazil. On August 20, 1966, the bodies of 2 men were found on Morro de Ventém, a hill near Niterói, Brazil, just a few miles from Rio de Janeiro. Locals had reported a strong, unpleasant smell coming from the area. When police investigated, they discovered the decomposing bodies of 2 men, both dressed in suits and wearing raincoats. Near each man's head was a strange lead eye mask. Each man carried money. One had 4,000 Cambodian reals in his pocket, while the other had 157,000 Cambodian reals in a plastic bag. Some notes were found with them, mostly filled with electrical formulas, but 2 stood out. The first note said, Sunday, 1 capsule after lunch. Wednesday, 1 capsule at bedtime. The second note read, be at the place arranged at 4:30 p.m. Take capsules at 6:30 p.m. After feeling effects, protect half the face with lead masks. Await the agreed signal. The bodies were taken for autopsy, and the men were identified as Miguel Jose Viana, who was 34 years old, and Manuel Pereira de Cruz, 32 years old. They were both from Campos, about 170 miles away. They were married with young families and well respected in their community. Both were known to be electronics enthusiasts. The police were able to piece together when and how the men arrived at the hill, but the details didn't explain the strange circumstances of their deaths. Viana and Cruz were last seen by their families on Wednesday, August 17th. They boarded a bus at 9 a.m., saying they were going to Sao Paulo, which is 430 miles away, to buy electronic equipment and a car. They had about 3 million Cambodian reals in cash for these purchases. The bus reached Niterói around 2 p.m. and the men got off. Since it was raining, they bought raincoats for about 9,400 Cambodian reals. They then stopped at a bar to buy a bottle of mineral water, keeping the receipt to get a refund for the empty bottle later. At about 3:15 p.m., they started walking up Morro de Ventém. A boy saw them sitting at a high point on the hill at around 5 p.m. The next day, on August 18th, the same boy saw the 2 men in the same spot on the hill, but this time they were lying down. 2 days later, on August 20th, the boy was hunting birds at the foot of the hill when he noticed a bad smell. His report of the odor led to the discovery of the bodies. By the time the bodies were found and examined, Viana and Cruz had begun to decompose. The autopsy showed no signs of violence, burning, or poison in their organs. It was thought that they both suffered heart failures, but there was no clear reason for this. It seemed likely they died sometime on the night of August 17th, and nothing found suggested they expected to die. There was also the question of what happened to most of their money, as they clearly hadn't had time to buy the car or equipment based on their last known actions. Additionally, the strange note about the lead masks did not match the handwriting of either man. It appeared that finding simple answers to the mystery would be difficult, and things were about to get more complicated. On August 17th, the same day Viana and Cruz climbed Morro de Ventém, a woman named Sonora Gracinda Barbosa Coutinho de Sousa saw an unidentified flying object. Sosa was driving with 3 of her children that evening when they spotted an oval-shaped object, orange in color, with a ring of fire around its edges, hovering over a hill and sending out rays in all directions. She stopped the car and they watched the object move up and down in the air for about 4 minutes. When she got home, she told her husband about what they saw. He drove back to look, but didn't see anything. A few days later, he decided to tell the police about the sighting. The hill where his wife saw the object was Morro de Ventém, where the bodies were found. Sosa's husband kept her from seeing news about the case. probably to avoid scaring her. But when he saw the story in the newspapers, he felt he should inform the police about the strange sighting on the same day the two men had been there. Fonseca, where they lived, is about 13.5 miles from Morro de Ventem, so she likely had no idea that Viana and Cruz were there earlier that day. Reports of the sighting appeared in local papers on August 25th, claiming that more information from the Sousas were being kept secret by the police. This was hard to prove, but sounded exciting. After the story was published, several other people called the police to confirm the sighting. They were afraid to report something so strange because the government discouraged UFO discussions at the time. However, Sonora Sosa's willingness to come forward gave others the courage to speak out. Around the same time, another strange story appeared in newspapers, but it was very brief. It mentioned that 4 years earlier, in 1962, a TV technician named Hermes had been found dead on a hill called Morro de Cruzeiro, near Neves. He was also found with a lead mask. Morro de Cruzeiro is about 176 miles from Morro de Ventem and 84 miles from Campos, where Viana and Cruz lived. However, there was no further information about this case, and it seemed the story was not double-checked at the time. Police quickly arrested a friend of the two dead men named Alicio Gomez for making conflicting statements. Cruz's wife told the police that Gomez had argued with her husband. This is likely why they went to find him. Gomez said that he, Viana, and Cruz were members of a secret group of scientific spiritualists who often attended seances. He claimed that almost all electronic experts and fans in the area were also scientific spiritualists. Gomez said that Viana and Cruz worked on many strange electronic experiments and wanted to communicate with beings on Mars. He also stated, which Cruz's father confirmed, that he and Cruz had an experiment in Cruz's garden that had exploded violently. Gomez mentioned a strange event that happened on June 13th, 2 months before Viana and Cruz died. That day, Gomez and the others were invited by Viana and Cruz to visit Atafona Beach, 24 miles from Campos. Just as Gomez arrived, he saw an intensely bright object come down from the sky and hover over the beach. It stayed for 5 minutes, then began to rise. There was a blinding flash and an explosion that shook buildings 15 kilometers away. Reports said that inquiries, likely by the police, found fishermen near Atafona who claimed to have seen a flying saucer fall into the ocean. Newspapers reported that the Brazilian Navy and Air Force intelligence were now looking into the mysterious deaths of Viana and Cruz. One paper claimed on September 16th that these Navy had intercepted strange messages on June 12th, the day before the Atafona explosion. These messages came from stations using identities that did not exist. No details about what the Navy heard were reported, but it was suggested that these messages were linked to the explosion on the next day. The same paper added 2 more strange details to the mystery. They claimed that the masks had been made in Viana's workshop, where pieces of the process were found, along with a book on scientific spiritualism that mentioned masks, bright lights, and spirits. The newspaper also stated that Viana had told his sister a day or 2 before the Atafona incident that he would soon be on an important mission, and it was secret, so she could not tell anyone. Later, the police found out that Gomez and other friends of Viana and Cruz were in Campos when Viana and Cruz were climbing Morro de Ventem, so they were not involved in the men's deaths. For 11 months, there were no new public updates about the mysterious deaths, but in August 1967, the police made some confusing statements to 2 newspapers. On August 19th, the newspaper Última Hora reported that the police were looking for a car that they believed had transported the bodies of Viana and Cruz from Campos to Morro de Ventem. If they found the car, they planned to dig up the bodies for more tests to see if the men died from violence, a drug overdose, or if they had committed suicide. This announcement suggested that the police either forgot what they had already learned or didn't trust it, which was strange. On August 26th, Última Hora announced that the bodies had been dug up and organs had been taken for examination. Police delegate Sergio Rodriguez said that important evidence was missed at the start of the investigation, and that his team was close to solving the case. They expected to find the guilty party in a few days. On September 3rd, the newspaper Correio da Manhã said detectives were going to look into the spiritualist groups. They claimed that Viana and Cruz had stopped at an electronics store before buying water, and that they probably met their killer there before climbing Morro de Ventem. The paper also said the men climbed on the hill on August 21st, 1966, which was the day after the bodies were found. Did the police really forget what they had already investigated, including the date the bodies were found? Or were the newspapers just trying to sell more copies by adding false details to an old story? Or was someone trying to change the events to make them seem less strange? It's hard to know, and no more news came out about the case that year, so it seemed that Delegate Rodriguez did not catch the expected guilty person. The case came up again in newspapers on June 28, 1968. The O Globo newspaper reported that police were trying to find a foreign man with blonde hair who had been seen talking to Viana and Cruz from a jeep before they climbed Morro de Ventem. Police also tested the men's hair for signs of poisoning by arsenic, mercury, barium, or thallium, but none was found, ending that line of investigation. Then there was no more news for another 8 months. Around February 23, 1969, several newspapers revisited the Morro de Ventem mystery, claiming the case was solved because of a confession from a man named Hamilton Bazzani, a criminal already serving a long sentence in Sao Paulo prison. Reports said a female relative of Bazzani told police that he admitted to being involved in the Morro de Ventem case, so they questioned him. Bazzani said he had been asked by 3 other local criminals to help with the crime. The 4 had gone to a spiritualist center in Niterói run by a woman they knew, where they met Viana and Cruz. The other 3 criminals signaled to Bazzani that Viana and Cruz were their targets. During the seance, they learned that Viana and Cruz were away from home and had a lot of cash in a briefcase. After the seance, Bazzani drove everyone to the base of Morro de Ventem. There, Viana and Cruz were forced out of their car and into the bushes by everyone except Bazzani, who stayed with the car. A half hour later, everyone but Viana and Cruz returned, and the criminals had the briefcase. They claimed they forced the 2 men to take poison at gunpoint. They planned to split the money the next day, but Bazzani didn't go because he felt they might kill him too. The newspaper reports then said that police were trying to catch the 3 other criminals, and one report claimed that the woman from the spiritualist center was already arrested. This meant that the story had completely changed from what was known after the first investigation in 1966. Many Brazilian UFO researchers thought Bazzani's story was made up to remove the mystery from a case that had too much connection to paranormal events for the Brazilian government's liking. That ended all the public coverage of the strange Morro de Ventem case in the Brazilian press. In conclusion, the lead masks case remains one of the biggest mysteries in Brazilian history. With the discovery of Viana and Cruz's bodies dressed in suits with lead masks and cryptic notes suggesting a strange experimental ritual, the question lingers: what really happened on that fateful day in August of 1966? Was it a bizarre attempt at contacting extraterrestrial beings, as some theories suggest? The idea of these electronics enthusiasts delving into scientific spiritualism and potentially communicating with life on Mars paints a chilling picture of their final hours. Or could it be that they fell victim to a violent crime, as the later confession from Hamilton Bazzani hinted? What about the mysterious UFO sighting reported on the same day and the coincidental connection to a previous case involving a similar lead mask? Were Viana and Cruz truly targeted because of their involvement in something much larger than themselves? What do you believe happened to Viana and Cruz? Was their death linked to a spiritual or extraterrestrial phenomenon, or was it just a tragic crime? The case of the Toxic Lady, also known as Gloria Ramirez. At 8:15 p.m. on February 9th of 1994, paramedics brought 31-year-old Gloria, who was barely conscious, into the emergency room at Riverside General Hospital in Moreno Valley, California. 45 minutes later, Gloria was dead, and 23 of the 37 ER staff members became sick after being exposed to toxic fumes coming from her body. Some of the hospital workers were so sick that they needed to be hospitalized. Even after one of the biggest forensic investigations ever, no one has been able to figure out exactly what caused her body to release those fumes. The case of the Toxic Lady caught attention worldwide. No one in the medical field had ever seen anything like this before. How could a dying woman give off enough toxic fumes to make so many people sick, but leave no trace of the cause? Doctors knew what caused Gloria's death. She had stage 4 cervical cancer. Her kidneys had failed, and she went into cardiac arrest. Her death wasn't caused by the fumes, but where did the fumes come from? Many people, from doctors to lawyers to regular folks, wondered. If the fumes didn't cause her death, then what is going on here? To answer that, we need to look at what witnesses said and what forensic science can tell us about the case. Gloria, a wife and a mother of 2, was very sick when she arrived at Riverside Hospital. Her health had gotten worse after being in home care for terminal cervical cancer. On the evening of February 9th, she started having trouble breathing and her heart rhythm became irregular. These are common signs that death is near. Her caregivers called an ambulance, hoping the hospital could help her. The Riverside ER team was used to seeing patients like Gloria, so they knew exactly what to do. They started by giving her an IV of Ringer's lactate solution, which helped with blood and electrolyte levels. Then they gave her sedatives, including diazepam, midazolam, and lorazepam. They also used a special bag to pump air into her lungs instead of using regular oxygen. Up until this point, everything seemed normal, but things changed when a nurse, Susan Kane, inserted a catheter to take a blood sample. As soon as she pulled the syringe out, she noticed a strange ammonia-like smell coming from the blood. She gave the syringe to Maureen Welch, a respiratory therapist, and then leaned closer to Gloria to figure out where the smell was coming from. Welch also smelled the syringe and agreed that it had an ammonia-like odor. She said it smelled like blood from someone who had chemotherapy. She passed the syringe to Julia Gorczynski, a medical resident who saw small yellowish particles floating in the blood and noticed the ammonia smell too. Dr. Humberto Ochoa, who was in charge of the ER, also saw the particles and agreed that the blood smelled like ammonia. Susan Kane stood up from Gloria, who was still alive, and suddenly felt dizzy. She walked toward the door but fainted before she could reach it. Julie Gorczynski also collapsed and had to be placed on a gurney and taken out. Then Maureen Welch started showing the same symptoms, feeling sick from what seemed to be a toxic substance. By this time, everyone near Gloria was affected. Even Dr. Ochoa felt ill and ordered the ER to be evacuated. Both staff and patients went outside to the parking lot where they removed their clothes down to their underwear and placed their outer clothing into hazmat bags. Gloria remained on a stretcher in the ER. A second trauma team quickly put on hazmat suits and returned to give her the help they could. They performed CPR, but at 8:50 p.m., the doctor in charge pronounced Gloria dead. To be safe, the team carefully wrapped her body in multiple layers of body bags, sealed it in an aluminium coffin, and moved it to an isolated area of the morgue. A trained hazmat team searched the ER for any sign of the substance that made people sick, but they found nothing. Meanwhile, the hospital staff had taken care of their own. 5 workers, including Susan, Julie, and Maureen, were hospitalized. Julie was the worst affected and spent 2 weeks recovering in the intensive care unit. The Riverside pathologists had a difficult and risky job ahead of them. They had to perform an autopsy on a body they thought might be releasing a dangerous chemical or pathogen. Wearing airtight protective suits, 3 pathologists worked quickly. In just 90 minutes, they finished the autopsy and came out of a sealed room with samples of Gloria's blood, tissue, and air from inside her body bags and the aluminium casket. However, the autopsy and toxicology tests found nothing unusual. The pathologists couldn't explain how a cancer patient could have caused such strange reactions. They agreed that her death was caused by cardiac arrest, which was due to kidney failure from stage 4 cervical cancer. The Riverside coroner confirmed this, saying there was no doubt about why Gloria had died. For the coroner, the case should have ended there. There was no evidence that the mysterious fumes were related to her death, and the strange air in the ER didn't play a role in her passing. Figuring out what happened in the ER was now the hospital's responsibility, but the public was putting a lot of pressure on the coroner to figure out what caused the fumes, just to make sure it didn't happen again. The coroner worked with the hospital, the health department, the toxicology lab, and Gloria's family to find some kind of answer. Gloria's family had no idea of anything she could have taken or been exposed to that would cause such a toxic reaction. The toxicology lab had never encountered a case like this before, and the health department started their own investigation. The county health department set up a 2-person team of medical experts to interview everyone who had been in the ER or nearby on February 9th of 1994. They even compared what each person had eaten that day. After a thorough investigation, with no results better than the hazmat team's failed search, the interviewers came to a conclusion: mass hysteria. The 2 doctors, who were also researchers, believed there was no toxic gas. They thought that, without evidence of a poisonous substance, the only explanation was that 23 people simply believed they were sick. Some of them, they said, imagined their symptoms so strongly that they ended up in intensive care. This was the report the health department gave to the coroner. The coroner, now facing a lot of backlash, had to find a way to manage the situation. Some of the healthcare workers who had been exposed and nearly died filed a defamation lawsuit against the hospital, the health department, and the 2 investigators who came up with the mass hysteria conclusion. Frustrated and out of options, the coroner, working behind his authority, asked for outside help. He turned to Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory near San Francisco. Lawrence Livermore was not known for medical or toxicology work. They had mainly focused on making nuclear weapons during the Cold War. By the 90s, with their original work slowing down and funding decreasing, they expanded and created the Forensic Science Center. Brian Anderson, the director of the center, took on the Toxic Lady case. The coroner gave him all the samples from Gloria's autopsy and the air containers used in the investigation. Anderson used a gas chromatograph mass spectrometer to analyze the samples, the same method used earlier by the Riverside County toxicologist who found nothing unusual. By this time, Anderson discovered something new. He found traces of dimethyl sulfoxide in Gloria's system. It wasn't a large amount, but it was clearly there. Anderson thought he might be onto something. Dimethyl sulfoxide is usually safe and stable. It's an organic sulfur compound used as a degreaser in automotive cleaning. Some cancer patients, as part of an alternative treatment, also use it by ingesting or applying it to their skin. At one point, the FDA was testing DMSO as a treatment for pain, and athletes used it for sports injuries. However, the FDA stopped the program when they found out that long-term use could cause blindness. Anderson came up with a theory to explain the strange events surrounding Gloria's death. Here's how the theory went. Gloria had been using DMSO to self-medicate. When the paramedics took her to the hospital, they gave her oxygen in the ambulance, and she got even more oxygen at the ER. The theory is that this extra oxygen started a chemical reaction with the DMSO in her system. DMSO's chemical formula includes carbon, hydrogen, sulfur, and oxygen, a harmless and stable mix. But according to Anderson's theory, when Ramirez received high amounts of oxygen, the DMSO in her body transformed into a different compound called dimethylsulfone by adding an extra oxygen atom. Dimethylsulfone is also harmless and is often found in plants and used as a dietary supplement. The problem starts when 4 oxygen atoms attach to the dimethylsulfone, turning it into dimethyl sulfate. This compound releases highly toxic fumes. Anderson believed this chemical change was the key to understanding what happened. The oxygen given to Ramirez converted the DMSO she had been taking into dimethylsulfone, which then turned into a dangerous gas-emitting dimethyl sulfate. The coroner liked Anderson's theory, and so did many scientists. The coroner added that Anderson's report to his final findings, even though everyone agreed that if dimethyl sulfate was released by Gloria in the ER, making people sick, it had nothing to do with her actual death. The coroner then closed the case, and the findings were published in Forensic Science International. But there were 2 major issues with Anderson's conclusion. First, more scientists disagreed with it than supported it. Some top toxicologists said it was impossible for the oxygen given in the hospital to trigger this chemical reaction. Second, Gloria's family denied that she was using DMSO to self-medicate. Interest in the Toxic Lady case was far from over. Many pointed out that DMSO is present in tiny amounts in almost everyone's body. It's a common ingredient in processed foods and passes through the body quickly, usually through the urinary system. In Gloria's case, a urinary blockage led to kidney failure, which caused a heart attack. Without the blockage, the DMSO likely wouldn't have been detected. Meanwhile, some experts believed another chemical could cause the same ammonia-like smell and symptoms experienced by 23 people in the ER: methylamine. Methylamine is not rare. It's produced in large quantities as a cleaning agent and transported in pressurized railroad cars. But it's heavily controlled by the government because it can be used in biological terrorism and to make methamphetamines. Methylamine is a key ingredient in meth production. If you've seen Breaking Bad, you'll remember how Walter and Jesse go to great lengths to steal methylamine and take precautions handling it. Before Breaking Bad, the New Times LA ran a story offering a different theory about what made the toxic lady toxic. The article hinted that Riverside County was a major hub for meth production and distribution, and that some hospital workers were smuggling methylamine to sell to meth makers. According to the report, workers would store the methylamine in IV bags, which were sealed, safe to handle, and wouldn't raise suspicion. The theory suggested that an IV bag filled with methylamine was accidentally used on Gloria in the ER. Since methylamine turns to gas quickly when exposed to oxygen, it could explain why no traces were found during testing. It had all evaporated into the air, poisoning 23 people. As we wrap up this mysterious and chilling case of Gloria, the toxic lady, many questions remain unanswered, and the theories we've explored only deepen the intrigue. What really happened in the Riverside ER? Was it truly a chemical reaction caused by the dimethyl sulfoxide she may have used, as suggested by the forensic team at Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory? Or was the hospital's theory of mass hysteria a plausible explanation for how so many experienced medical professionals became ill? Then there's the controversial and shadowy idea: could a mishandling of dangerous chemicals like methylamine have the root cause of the toxic fumes? Could it be that we simply don't have all the pieces of this puzzle? Is there still some unknown chemical interaction or oversight that was missed? As you think about this case, what's your take? Do you believe in the scientific explanation, or is there something more sinister at play? Could this have been a case of medical mishap or even a more secretive chemical mix-up? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments down below about either of these cases and what you think really happened. Thank you so much for watching this video, and if you enjoy this kind of content, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. See you next week.